So let's talk a little bit about a couple of these questions. I'll spend about maybe 15 to 20 minutes talking about buying a house. And then we'll talk about your speaking, giving directions with speaking and talk about ways to change or improve that. Okay, so let's do this as a class because of our time. How do you find out how much you can spend to buy a house? I mean, if you have $1 million in the bank, that's easy. But for most of us or all of us, we don't. So how do you know how much you can spend to get a house? Cash? Okay, but how do I know? Like, so if I have cash in the bank. Okay, yeah, so I have to understand or look at what my salary is. Okay. So typically, what the banks look at is, well, the history, but there's a formula that they use that's approximately 4 times your gross income. Gross means total before the taxes or expenses. So if somebody is earning, or if a couple is earning about 60,000 a year, that means approximately they can buy a house for 240,000, or I should say that's the maximum the banks will give them. This is just a rough calculation. There's a couple of other things they look at, but in general, 3, 4, or 5 times your salary. Okay. And that's where, if there's 2 people that are going to be on title for the house, so with a brother or a sister, with your husband or wife or a partner, they will look at all of your income. Then, as Christian mentioned, they're also going to look at the last couple of years. So if you've been here just 1 year or less than a year, it's going to be harder. You're going to have to put a higher down payment on. But if you've been here 2 years or 3 years and you have income from different areas, so for example, for myself, I teach, but I also have 2 businesses. I teach privately, so private tutoring. I also do some renovations. Neither of those make a lot of money because my most focus is on teaching, but I do have a bit of income from those other sources. So they look at my income from Red River College, they look at my income from the teaching I do privately and from my renovations or making changes in houses. So how do you know how much it's going to cost you for your mortgage? Not for the monthly mortgage payments, but how do I calculate how much I will spend if I buy a house that's 300,000? If I buy a house that's 400,000, 500,000, what do I have to calculate to find this?
Calculate the web.
Okay, so yeah, different websites like RBC, TD, Assiniboia Credit Union, all of the banks and credit unions and the government of Canada, they have a mortgage calculator on their website. So usually what they're looking at is they're looking at your down payment. That means the money you have in the bank to put towards the house. They look at your interest rate. Then they look at amortization. Amortization means how long are you going to be taking the mortgage in order to pay it off. Typically in Canada, we have 25 or 30-year mortgages. Some of you were in business or you remember in 2008, in the United States, there was a housing crash, and then there was a problem in many countries around the world. There was many factors, but one of the factors was they were offering not 25 or 30 years, but they were offering 40 and 50-year mortgages. So the longer that you're spreading it out, that means the less that you're paying per month. They were also doing other silly things, like they were lending 100% of the house price. So I didn't have to have any down payment. Okay, let me just stop there. Some of these terms you might not be familiar with. That's okay. I'm not going to go into detail tonight, but part of this is understanding money. And I've used this term before, is your financial IQ. Okay, so one thing that you should work on over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, is understanding different terms, vocabulary, and basic math in order to increase your knowledge in this area. Because you'll probably be buying 1, 2, 3, 5 houses in your lifetime. So anyway, so this was one of the factors, because basically they were giving anyone that had even if they didn't have much of a salary or a job, they were giving them 100% of the house price and only low payments. So as soon as house prices started to go down, then people couldn't make the payments and they couldn't borrow more money. And then that accelerated. It wasn't the cause of the crash, but it made the crash go faster. Okay, what are closing costs when you buy a house? Because most people think, let's just do very simple math. If I buy a house for 300,000 and I have 10% down payment, that's 30,000. Okay. So that means that I'm going to borrow 270,000. Let's just say in the bank I have 35,000. So they say, okay, I'm ready to buy a house, not with 35,000, because there's going to be other expenses when you're buying the house. So 2.5 in Winnipeg about, okay. So what Christian is saying is about 2 or 2.5% of the purchase price you need in extra cash. Okay, so 300,000, that means you need about $6,000, $6,000 to $8,000. Okay, so 35,000 would not be enough. I would actually say 3 to 4% to be safe. But what are the actual costs? So this is a calculation to understand how much extra I need besides the down payment. What is that? Where does that money go when you buy a house? What are the things I have to pay for when I buy a house? So many of you may not know because you haven't bought a house yet. Okay, but what do I pay money to? Who do I pay money to when I buy a house? Sorry? Okay, so I have the lawyer. So lawyer fees typically for a house will probably be about 750 plus, okay, just a minute, plus their other expenses. So this could be as much as 1,500 to 2,000. Okay, so insurance. Okay, but what else? Okay. Anything else? Okay, so yes, there's a land transfer tax, which is based on how much the value of the house is. On average, it's about 2%. And some of this you can put back into the mortgage. So it's not that you need all of this in cash, but you do need some of this to be paying to the different places. Any other closing expenses? Sorry? Okay, so here, let me just chat a minute about the brokers. Okay, so with a mortgage broker, I know there's some in Manitoba and Winnipeg, they will come to you and say, oh, your salary is 50,000 a year. I can get you a mortgage for 500,000. If you meet someone that's in that range, remember what I set up here. you're probably looking at 4 times your salary. So the banks would give him 200,000. This person is saying, I can get you a mortgage for 500,000. Don't take it because he's going to ask you for extra money and it's not legal. And I know some newcomer friends of mine, they've been looking for houses and they've had one of my friends who makes less than I do. I was told I could afford a house at about 240,000. He was told by a broker, oh, I can get you a mortgage for 700,000. So it's maybe possible, but usually you're paying that person plus it may not be legal. But typically with mortgage brokers, there is no fee because the bank or the lending company pays them a fee. But there are some times where you might have to pay a little bit. And I'm not going to go into reasons why, but usually there's no fee. With a real estate agent, you're paying anywhere from 2.5 to 3%. So this is, you're going to, if you talk to real estate agents, you're going to hear them and say, if you're buying a house, it's free. It doesn't cost us anything. I disagree, and I've argued with some of the real estate agents, because if Christian helps me buy a house and I'm buying it from Andre, the price is negotiated. I pay for the house. The money for him comes out of what I pay. It's not free. It's coming out of what I pay. So if he's a bad negotiator, sorry, you're probably not, but if he's a bad negotiator and I pay higher, or if he wants to be tricky and he puts a higher price, or he says, oh, you really need this house, put a high price so you get it, I will end up paying him more than maybe I should. So you need to find an agent who's honest and also who knows the market, which I talked about in the past. Let me just show you one other list, because there are other things that can be considered for this. Let me just find the right, yeah. So the lawyer, there's taxes, which is the land transfer tax. There's the insurance, which was mentioned. Sometimes with property taxes, you have to pay in advance. Because in the city of Winnipeg, whoever, if it's from June or before, then the owner is paid. It's from July or after, you have to pay. So there may be a couple $100 here. If you get somebody to look at the house before you buy it, that will be $400 to $600, depending on the home inspector. And then there might be some other, moving expenses. And what I've seen many people do, besides moving expenses, let me just add that to our list. Besides moving expenses, many of them go out and they buy more things. Oh, the fridge at the house is old. I'm getting a new fridge. I need a freezer. Oh, it's a bigger house. I need to get another couch or sofa. Oh, we have an extra bedroom. I'm getting a full bed. I've seen some people spend another 10 or 20,000 because they're, oh, I need all of these things. So you have to consider that, or just be cautious. You might not want to buy all those things when you're buying and spending all of your money on the house already. Okay, and then we've talked of this in the past, but ongoing expenses when you buy a house, those are the things like your property tax. You have your home insurance. You'll have your utilities. What else do we have? Those are the bigger ones. And then if you have repairs that you have to. Okay. So let me just show you a calculation. So this is from the Government of Canada's website. It's the same as RBC or TD. They're all similar, but it just shows you how do you calculate. So you put in how much your mortgage is. You put in your interest rate, whatever it is now, 5, 6, 7%, how many years. And then here under payment frequency, you have many choices. Often people by default just say, I want to pay the mortgage once a month. Don't do that. You want to pay it bi-weekly or accelerated bi-weekly. Because what that's doing is getting 1 or 2 extra payments each year. And it doesn't seem like much on paper, $500, $700. But over 5 or 10 years, that'll be a difference of $7, $8, $10,000. Because it's paying your mortgage down, not the interest rate. So I don't know if I want to share this now or later. I'll share it now. This is a summary of my mortgage from this year. I'm not going to show you the exact details because there's personal information, but over this year, we were paying $548.88 per every 2 weeks. So if I put that over 12 months, 24 payments. So let's just say it's 550 so it's easy. Okay, so 550 times 24. Can somebody calculate how much that is? 550 times 24. $26,400. Okay, now calculate oh, well, I can do it in my head. So if I did the bi-weekly accelerated, because I was just doing per month, there's an extra payment in there. So if I did the bi-weekly, it would actually be 26,940. Yeah, 950.
Multiply 2 weeks and multiply 24. Yes?
No. This would be 2 weeks times 12. 12 months. Yeah. Okay. So if I just do a straight calculation, but we can see it's around 20. It should be half that. It should be around 13,000. Okay, 13,200. Okay. So when I made my payments, this is the summary at the end of the year. Out of this amount, 11,825 went to interest. 2,445 went to the mortgage. And 351 went to fees. So this is where people never get ahead financially. Because if you move or sell your house and buy a new house every 4 or 5 years, your mortgage, I should have told you at the start. So my mortgage at the start of the year was 195,600. So at the end of the year, I paid out $13,000, but my mortgage is now only down 2,000. So it's at 193, 520. Okay. So I've only paid off a small amount. The rest of it's gone to interest. So usually years 1 to 7, most money's going to the interest, which benefits the bank. So if I move in 5 years and then another 5 years and another 5 years and I buy bigger houses every time, I'm never paying my mortgage down. I'm just paying the interest to the banks. So this is one reason why people stay in debt or never feel that they're getting ahead. Then they have kids, then they have vehicles, then they get most people get a newer jobs and then they get a higher salary, so they buy a bigger house and it becomes a trap, a cycle they're in. That's why I've talked in the past, you should have somebody living in your house, or you should find a house where you can make renovations or make changes, because following this is just it's not going to help you in the long term. I'm not going to do it tonight, but I have some articles for us to read. 35%, so a third of seniors don't have enough money to pay for their life right now in Canada. So if you've been following this formula that people say, go to school, get a good job, start buying a nice house, have your kids, save money for the future. If you follow that advice, which most people do, that means that 35% of those people are not going to have enough money in 20 years or 50 years to retire. So you have to do something different. And so I'll chat more about, and we've talked a little bit, but you need a side business. You need to manage your housing and not move every few years. You need to manage your daily expenses. Okay. right now, I know some of you aren't listening to me because you're saying, I'm not going to buy a house, Mr. Trevor. But step one is not buying a house. I'm actually trying to have you think of step 3 and 4. Step one is you need to be thinking about your money. Where is your money going now? If you're not managing your money and your expenses and income now, you're not going to get to a position. You might end up buying a house at some point, but you're not going to end up where you're going to be safe in the future with your finances. And in 20 years, you'll have money to retire, or 50 or whatever. Okay. So I'll talk more about that, but I know the stats because I used to work with people with money. Right now, 80% of Canadians have more debt, more than 20,000 in credit card debt or loans, etc. They're never going to get out of it. So they're a slave, basically. I don't want to be a slave. So so some people sometimes have asked me during these classes, so Mr. Trevor, that means you're rich. Because if I'm following these principles, have more money than others on average. For me, what I did, instead of buying houses and properties and where I'm comfortable now, I used the money at different times in my life as I needed it. So for a few years, we went to Indonesia every year. I was also able to take time off every few weeks or months as I was teaching over the years. When my wife was sick, which I talked with some of you about in the past, then I was able to work part-time, and for a while I didn't work at all. So I haven't always made lots of money and continued to make money, but sometimes I've stopped making money, but I've still been able to live and not be worried about money. And then as I shared with some of you, we came in 2016, I had $100 in the bank. I didn't have a job for a couple of months. But within 5 years, we saved up $80,000 and we only made 30 to 40,000 a year. So we kept our expenses quite low and we were careful with our money. So for some people, they say, well, I'm only making 30,000 a year. I can never buy a house. Yes, you can, because we did. And it was my wife and I both working, but sometimes part-time, not full-time. And then now that we have a house and students living with us, now we're actually making more than we were then. So since we bought a house 2 years ago, we've saved another 50,000, even though we've now had a house expenses on top of everything else. So it's possible. It's just how you're managing your money. You had a question, Vita?
So like you don't buy the house when you not get the job, so maybe investing them. Because with this money you can live where you live in other country, you have so much money.
I disagree with that because you can. So right now, most of you are in survival mode. You're just trying to get enough money for day by day, but you're doing everything yourself. And so that's where I've talked of in the past. We've had international students living with us. If I break my leg or I can't teach or I get sick, they're still paying me money each month for their renting a room in our house. So that's one example, or looking at side jobs or different types of things. But back to your question. So in Canada, if you talk to the government, if you talk to a financial advisor, if you talk to the banks, they're going to tell you to buy RRSPs and TSFAs. And the end of, you'll see lots of ads in the next month, because at the end of February, that's when the deadline closes, and then so you can put money from last year up until the end of February to these, and they say this will help you reduce your taxes. For me personally, I have no money in either of those, because I would rather use my money to buy courses that increase my knowledge or to put towards real estate or business, because over the years, this will get me 3%, 5%, 7%. If I have knowledge, so I've shared with you, but when we bought our house, we got it for $100,000 less than the market, and no others didn't want to buy it because I have knowledge of how to repair foundations. So my knowledge saved me 100,000. My knowledge in making money from side businesses or starting a business, or that's what's going to make me more money than putting money and just having it in savings. You should have some money in savings. For you guys, each of you should work first to have $1,000 in the bank and to not have any debts outside of a mortgage. Those are your first two steps. After that, many financial advisors will say, put the money into the savings or into investments, but those investments make the bank rich, not you. Real estate or side businesses make, or courses or programs, certifications, things that will help you increase your knowledge. That's where I would put your money to, because that'll pay you more than these over 20 years or 30 years. I don't know if that answered your question. I have a section that I'll talk about in February, and when we do talk about taxes, how do you manage your money and what should you be doing after your income and expenses? So I'll give more details at a later time, but that's the advice. For me, I don't have money in these things. You can have a bit in it, but I wouldn't put most of my money in those things.
And the account for the children
Ah,
is.
okay.
is
So let
how-
me talk about that for a minute because I made a mistake because I didn't know this. In 2004, our son was born, and so registered education savings plan. These are brought out and it says, put this money in so that when your child is in university, you have money saved up for your child. The challenge with this is there's two types, which I didn't know this before. When I bought into it, there's two types. One is self-directed, which is what you should have, and now the banks have that. But when I bought these in 2004, they didn't. The other is a group plan. So what they tell you, how they sell it to you is everyone puts their money in, and then when your child's ready for university, maybe some people stop paying over those 10 years or 18 years. They've dropped out, there's more money for you, and then your child gets that money. That's what I put money into. The government since that time has said you shouldn't, because the problem with these, and this in 2013, I had difficulty with money. If you stop making payments in this on any month, they can take all of your money and return you the basic that you paid. The government grants go back to the government and they keep all of the interest that you've put in. So this is an option, but the challenge with the group plan is, so my son was, let's say he was 6 months at the time. So for 17 years, 17 times 12 is what, 170, 100. So about 200 times, because it's once a month, we had to put money in here. So whether you have money or don't have money, I still had to set aside and make sure I had money in there. So when I was almost bankrupt, I still had to borrow money from my sister or my parents because I couldn't stop paying into it. And they never tell you that at the start. With self-directed, you can pause it, you can wait a few months, you can make changes to it. But with the group plans, it's harder. So I would not go with a private company. I would go to the bank and set one of those up for your kids, but through the bank. That's a safer, flexible option.
For education.
This is for education for your children.
Yes.
When your children are 0 to 6, the government will give you extra money towards this.
The
And-
first time is 40%.
It's changed, so I don't know all the rules now, but
The first time is 40%. And the next year is 20.
okay.
You put 100, the government put.
Do you use this?
Yes, I did this when my son was about 6 months old, but I put it into a group one, which I didn't realize was not good, and that's what 80% of them are. If you're going to use this with your kids, go to the bank. So doing it through the bank where it's self-directed is what you should look for. So look for a self-directed RESP. Okay, and then you can start them as soon as your child is born, but you can't start them before a child's born because you have to have a SIN number, a social insurance number for your children. Okay. So yeah, that is something you can put money towards.
And
But-
additional, this money, you have put in the fixed term.
Well, once it's
Next-
self-directed, you can choose, yeah.
Extra.
Well, it's
percent.
safety, yeah.
Yes.
Cause fixed rate, then you can know you're getting this, but if it goes higher, you won't get it. But yeah, then you have options within that.
20% per year is good.
Well, yeah, I don't think it'll be 20% all the time, but there is part of the time with that. So,
Because, I don't know, the different company, to put different titles, 20% is,
it might be
a lot of-
okay, right?
yes.
Okay, yeah, it might be a lot of risk or it might be not so much. PR, usually permanent resident and Canadian citizens, yes. So that's, okay, I can talk more about money, but I'm going to stop there. I do want to talk for about 10 minutes about your speaking assessments, or not assessments,